So if we want to talk about what happened, imagine that this is the submarine. Actually, pretty much what it looked like. Had a little front shield, front window shield, window, whatever you want to call it. There was a bit of landing gear down here. There was a pressurized hull underneath of an outer shell, which we will mark with orange. So this is what it looked like. Now, as you're going underwater, so obviously the average surface temperature, not surface temperature, surface pressure is going to be about 14.7 pounds per square inch if you live in the US. Don't ask me what that is in centimeters and meters. I don't want to do the conversions tonight. So they had traveled about an hour, 45 minutes down out of 2.5 hour journey. They're about 60% of the way down on their way to approximately 12,400 feet. So you're in the ballpark of looking at probably anywhere from 8,000 to 10,000 feet underwater. So you're talking about you've got tons and tons of water standing on top of you. Because this water off on the side doesn't matter. This water off on the side doesn't matter, except for it's applying pressures this way. But when you're talking about the force that people are kind of looking at the most, it's this downwards force. Because when you're in water, you're not just suspending, you're suspending with all of this pressure physically sitting on top of you. This is why you see fish that look like the blobfish. When they come back up above water, when you pull them up, their bodies physically expand, and that's why they look so deformed when above water. But if you ever see a photo of a blobfish that is underwater, it looks quite different. So a blobfish underwater, this is a blobfish underwater. Pretty normal looking fish here when compared to the image that's made it so famous. This is because of the fact that you pull a fish up too quickly, it's going to experience decompression sickness, it's going to bloat, and essentially all of that pressure within inside of its body is going to be forced out. So now going back to what we're talking about, that's the sort of pressures that they were dealing with on the submarine. So at 12,400 feet, it's approximately 65 or 6,200 psi. So being about 60% of the way down, you're looking at about 5,000 pounds per square inch of water sitting on top of you. Tons upon tons of water. The human body would not survive down there, which is why you need the pressurized hull. So, again, for anyone who's just joined, we're just quickly talking about what happened to the Titan today. The orange is simply the outer shell, the black is the visible pressurized hull. I have no clue if this was a double pressurized hull, if it was a single pressurized hull. I have a feeling that it may not have been a double pressurized hull based on what happened, because if it was double pressurized, that pinpoint needle weakness that they're talking about is less likely to happen. Now, you reach this pressure, I mean, if anything goes wrong, it's catastrophic. And unfortunately, it was catastrophic. So, what exactly happened? In about 30 milliseconds, the entirety of the submarine collapsed in upon itself. And in case you're curious, it takes about 100 milliseconds for the human brain to receive a pain signal. So, throughout all this tragedy, at the very least, it's not going to make it any better, but at the very least, they died painlessly. It's such a horrible thing to have to think about, to have to say, but if you want to try to shed any light upon this, it would be that. So, the first thing that's going to happen is that all of the walls are going to start collapsing in to a central point. So the further away a wall is, the faster it's going to accelerate. So likely this backside is moving the fastest. But one thing to keep on top of this is that you have this water rushing in from all sides, but there's still air occupying this space, and that air has to go somewhere. And what happens is that in these sort of situations, there's a phenomenon known as cavitation, which we actually see quite often on submarine propellers, in that they displace water at such a rate and with such a pressure that it actually superheats gas bubbles to approximately the temperature of the surface of the sun. So not only did these people inside suffer from pressure crushing and flying glass, being crushed by metal, being crushed by at this depth, I have no idea how many tons of water are on top of them. Hundreds, thousands. It, it's just unfathomable without doing any calculations. But they've also been exposed to quite possibly the hottest temperature any human has ever been exposed to. So, once again, to reiterate, this all happened in approximately 30 milliseconds. Human brain takes about 100 milliseconds to receive a pain signal. Now, obviously, to go back to cavitations are incredibly loud. It's one of the issues that the US Navy has had with building submarines that are stealthy and quiet is that to making a blade or propeller quiet actually has the inverse effect of creating a cavitation, which, when that bubble pops, is very loud and can be easily picked up by sonar because it's essentially a radar ping just going off. So the US Navy put out a statement in which they said, at approximately this time, on this date, our sonar buoys picked up, and they called it an anomaly because just a sonar ping or an anomaly within what the buoy is hearing is not enough to be a determining factor. That is when you send out other things to go searching in that area, which is what happened. But I have a feeling that this is why the U.S. Coast Guard was not asking uh, Britain to send the plane with the ROV that they had, because they were already positive that the anomaly they heard was the implosion of the Titan. So, for a final recap, approximately 8,000 to 10,000 feet down, after an hour and 45 minutes of descent, after into their 2.5 hour descent, the Titan imploded. All 5 souls were lost on board. Tragedy. I don't know who has been keeping up with it. I certainly was all day. Today, at approximately 2:24, they did find a action. Apologies. At approximately 12:30, they did find the debris field. At approximately 2:24, they released a statement indicating that the pieces of debris they had found were a part of the outer shell of the Titan and a part of the landing gear, which led them to the conclusion that it was a catastrophic loss of pressure. Now, before we move on, to give you a visual, I have this short little link on Twitch. as we said. You can see the back end quickly collapses in, everything centers around a singular point, and there's an explosion heard from the fabrication. That is what we know as the general public about the issue. Obviously, there has been many other things being announced from people within the company, including that they skipped safety tests, that they weren't listening to their chief of safety, their engineers who were stating that the vehicle simply wasn't ready for the venture. So they had also attempted this back in 2022, to which they quickly had to resurface after I think an hour and a half due to a battery drain, but that would be an unrelated issue to a sudden catastrophic loss of pressure. So it's not like it wasn't a thoroughly tested submersible, but you have to make sure with a submersible when you're going down to those depths, you have to have a rigorous testing system in order to make sure that there was no weakness applied upon the vehicle. And unfortunately, that is just what seems to have happened.